just go ahead. All right. So you were saying about day one. Tell me again about the day one.
Yeah. So day one, you figure last Sunday, I woke up, I set an intention that I was going to do this. I meditated on it, and then had a half an avocado at 8 a.m. in the morning last Sunday. And then the first day of eating nothing but drinking water, your head messes with you a little bit because you're like telling yourself you're hungry. Your internal clock is saying it's lunchtime. You're saying it's Sunday and normally eating nachos, watching football, whatever it is, right? And then your body's got to clear out the sugars and caffeines and all that stuff, right?
Right.
So on day two, I started taking lemon juice and Himalayan sea salt together, which creates a natural electrolyte.
Yes.
And then I was taking MCT oil, which is just coconut oil in small doses, but that was more so to keep your brain kind of going because your brain needs the oil to function.
For sure.
Right. And by the halfway through day two, it was easy breezy the whole way. Right. I mean, outside of like, sometimes I'd be sitting there working for 3 hours and be like, I want pretzels or, whatever this thing is. And then all I would do is just go for a walk or around the block or meditate for a few minutes and then be like, no, fuck you. We're refocusing on this shit right now. Now, the thing you're talking about though, with your stomach issues, what someone had told me is that like, if you think about it, right? If your body takes about 2,000 calories to function every day,
okay,
right? The average person, right? Sure. Whatever. And if you on that day one don't eat anything, you are going to deplete, right? Those whatever 2,000 calories, whatever's there from didn't process from the day before, you're going to empty the tank. And then if the goal to true weight loss, and if you look this up for every master trainer, every endurance runner, it's being in a calorie deficit.
Correct.
Right? So if you keep your brain running, i.e. MCT oil and electrolytes, and run in a calorie deficit for a week, which is what I did. When I got to 5 o'clock yesterday, I burned about 8,000 calories in a week, which is about 3 or 4% of my body weight in a week.
And how much weight did you see a difference in the scale? You had to have seen something.
But by Wednesday, people in my office were like, what are you doing? What are you doing to lose weight? You look so skinny right now. And it's like you automatically reduce the inflammation in your body from all the chemicals, right, in a day or two. So your skin is going to get better looking. You're going to squeeze down a little bit. And then by day 3, you're actually dropping. 8,000 calories is the equivalent of about a marathon. That's how many calories you would burn in a marathon.
There you go.
Right. And so I go in, I'm a guy who thinks with math and, I can't help but think about analytics and stuff like that. And it's like, think about it. If you want to lose weight, if you were to do 3 months of this, right, fast for 1 week a month, and you didn't work out at all, right? Because you really can't do a lot of working out because of the calorie intake deficit. But then the next week you ate, very healthy, and then did 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks working out, in 3 months, you could lose 16% of your body weight without even changing your life at all.
It's a pretty good amount.
Right. I think every single one of us thinks that we're probably 15 to 20% overweight.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what started kind of when you mentioned this, one thing that stuck in my head is there's a guy, and I wish I could remember his freaking name, but he interviewed on Dropping Bombs, Brad Lee's show. And he went to the doctor and they said, you got cancer. You're going to die in 2 weeks. And so he decided to go to Costa Rica, I believe. And he fasted for 39 days, I believe. Straight water, that was it. And the result of that was it essentially ate the cancer. It essentially either ate the cancer or basically starved. It did. It starved the cancer, opposed to him taking chemo, which the percentages of that probably it's not very good.
Right. Right.
But he comes back and like his tumor or whatever it was completely almost gone.
Yep.
And so that story has stuck in my head since. And so I, when you posted that the other day, I was like, God, maybe I just need to like squeeze out whatever's going on in my stomach.
Well, the piece that the piece that I left out there as I digressed a little bit was what happens is, and this ties into the cancer example, is that when your body goes into a calorie deficit, right? The cells that it eats first, right? Our body, the piece that we forget, right, is our bodies are built to survive, right? We're built to rebuild constantly. And so the cells that we go after, when we go into a calorie deficit, the cells that the body eats first are the weakest ones.
Right.
And then after it eats the weak ones, which is actually, it then starts to produce new white blood cells. It produces new stem cells. It produces, because now it's like, all right, first we're going to protect ourselves by I mean, it's like a natural selection, right? It's like eat the weak and then bring on the new minions, right? It's like the way the whole world works.
Right.
So, and I was talking to a friend of mine who texted me while I was doing it, and he's a bodybuilder, and he was saying that every time he gets an injury, you know, he goes and sits on his couch for a week and just fasts for the whole week. Whereas every single person who's got a flu, every single person who doesn't feel well, you got a cold, what do? We go on the couch, we watch TV, we get medicine, we eat soup, we want burgers, we sit there and stuff our faces for a week, and all we're doing is getting in the way of our body doing what it's built to do.
That's interesting. I would never expected a bodybuilder to do that, but it makes all the sense in the world.
Right.
I mean, it makes complete sense. Wow. All right. So, all right. So when I do your intro, I pronounce it Conlon, right?
Correct.
Okay, good. And you you do cybersecurity. Is it your own business, or do you work for the government? What do you?
So I'm the I guess the best way to say it is, I mean, it's our business, but we have investors. So I'm just trying to think of the best way to do it is you could just say I run a cybersecurity company.
Okay.
And then I can dig into it a little bit to explain it.
Perfect. And what Press Forward project is that to help vets?
Yep.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about that, because I want to talk about that as well.
Sure. So, so my goal, my goal is to get a couple of, well, let me back up for a second. So when I started to become an entrepreneur, made the leap from corporate world, I would come across these other veterans, and like homeless veterans, and they give you the woe is me, the government didn't take care of me, like I fought for this country, and I respect all those things. However, I came from a really crappy upbringing. I've had my share of trials and tribulations the way everyone else does. And I got to a point where I was like, none of that stuff got in my way. And my goal is to get a couple more wins underneath my belt business-wise. And then I want to pivot hard and become a transformational coach for veterans who are in transition. And my motto is, the only way you can work with a really good coach is the coach has had to have done the thing that I'm trying to do.
For sure.
Right. And so, I'm building my own story and my own testimonial to say, if I can do this, you can too.
Absolutely.
Right. And
Absolutely.
so the Press Forward project is the beginning of that. And it's the laying the groundwork of, the Press Forward project is a brand, right? Press Forward. It's got a purpose of empowering, others to move forward in a meaningful way. And we've done everything from build white label coffee bean products to a podcast to we're rolling out some men's hair product line in the next couple of weeks. And it's like, we've got all this stuff at our disposal nowadays where, for for $200 or $300, you can file an LLC and you can figure out a business. And if you don't have $200 or $300, guess what? Don't fucking eat for a week.
Right. Good point. It's a great point, because I guarantee you, it's a great point. All right, so let me go ahead and I'll do the intro, and then I want you to, just tell me your story about, who the hell you are, how you got here, what would ever, convince somebody to get into cybersecurity, the whole 9 yards. So, welcome to the Successful Life Podcast. I'm your host, Corey Barrier, and I'm here with Neal Conlon. And Neal, so I met Neal, basically met Neal last November when, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is when both of our lives kind of took a turn for growth, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so Neal went to see Tony Robbins at the same time that I did. And I think I can speak for myself. It changed my whole life. And I would say that that's probably fairly accurate for Neal as well. So Neal also, he is a former Marine. So he's a vet. He's a Press Forward project is a project he's working on, which he's going to talk about a little bit. And then he is also, what do you call it? You run a company that does cybersecurity. Did I say that right?
Yeah, I think that's the best way to intro it. Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So, with all that said, Neal, welcome, and let's rock and roll. Let's hear all about who you are. By the way, Neal's on his 5th day of fasting, by the way, with no food whatsoever.
Hey man, well, first and foremost, really appreciate the relationship that we have. We were both at Tony Robbins last year, both followed each other on social media after that. And I was just saying to a really good friend of mine the other day, if you went back a couple of years ago, people would say, oh, well, don't pay attention. You think you have all these friends on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever it is. And it's interesting because the landscape has really changed, especially if you're in like a certain tribe of people, right, where you can actually connect with somebody, right, in a very meaningful way, stay in touch with them and actually bond, and build a legitimate relationship that leads up to, maybe it's not the time for us to work or partner or collaborate in this thing now, but you know what, this guy or this girl or this kid is very like-minded to me, and therefore I'm going to follow those people. And I know we're both we both follow and interact with the same communities, and it's like, if you're focused on growth and building a company, and some of the other content that's out there says, get rid of the high school friends off of your feeds and get rid of the people who are not supporting you, and then really hone it into those people that, you can have a meaningful relationship with. I mean, you and I have both seen the outcomes of what that's like. And it's like, I don't need to see you, come and ask me how I'm doing. But like I posted the other day, and you and I agreed, it was like, I want to build a tribe of people who are going to hold me accountable for the shit that I say I'm going to do, that they can come to me and I can hold them accountable. They're going to hold me accountable. And then on top of it, if I need support or help, they're going to throw everything they can at me, because, we all got to build each other up and co-elevate a little bit. So thank you for having me on the podcast first and foremost.
Oh, you're very welcome. And so, it's interesting that you mentioned that, how the landscape changed, because you're right, because it used to be that, and really maybe even still to this day to an extent with with Facebook, because I guess I relate it to it being that, people you don't really know or ever will meet. But like you said, it's changed. It's all about what you put out. If you put out good shit, and if you put out positive stuff, if you put out the fact that you're having a really fucked up day, and you get those people that understand you and support you. And it's crazy how we've built this community. And I say that in a general sense, whether it be Tony or Robbins or Arete or whatever, it's all everybody in these groups, for the most part, I won't say everybody, but I would say 95% are in this to do something good for somebody else. And
Right.
that's the
Right.
crazy thing. I mean, to me, it's just incredible because it's an era that this country has not seen in a long time. And these groups of people are getting bigger and it's actually doing good for people. And I'm super excited to be a part of, of Arete and then, connected with people with Tony. I mean, it's just, you just know you're dealing with somebody most of the time that's a pretty good person that have good intentions.
Right. I mean, I'll tell you one quick thing, and then I'll give you a little bit of the background here, so folks can understand where this all stems from. But there's been at least 8 times this year that somebody that I've never met in person, that I just know through either the Arete Syndicate or through Tony Robbins' network or some other network that I'm affiliated with, I've talked to them, connected with them, had a conversation with them, and they said, you know what? Anytime you want to come to my house, or you know what, we should brainstorm. When can you come to my house? Or the next time you're in Dallas, stop by my house. Or when can I come to your house? And there's been 8 times this year that I've done it, where I've planned and been like, you know what? I see value in us spending time together. Next month, I'm coming for 2 or 3 days. So, somebody from Tony Robbins' network, I had a phone call with a couple of days ago because I did go back and see Tony just 2 weeks ago. And the woman was like, so why don't you find 2 days in your schedule and just come down and stay with me for 2 days, right? And we live in this amazing world where it's like, it's amazing, right? Some people are so focused on all the negative things, but we live in this amazing world where a woman who doesn't know me from anything other than we've had some exchange, some social media posts in a business capacity, just to be honest, has said, just come to my house and come stay with me, right? I mean, like, 97% of the planet would not do that.
No, you're right. I totally agree. Totally agree.
Right?
But there's a bond, there's a trust, there's a connection that like Andy says, if you know, you know.
Right. Right.
And it's unreal. I've built this network for me, my network, literally because I connected with people that had an Arete shirt on because I wanted to be a part of their circle. And one of my business partners, I met him the first time at Arete Live, but him and I have created several things now, and it was simply because we collaborated and did an Instagram Live because we'd never done one together. We'd never done one, period, as far as 2 people. And so that's how the ball got rolling. And another guy, I'll just quickly tell you, Chris Saunders, I reached out to him. Well, fuck, he lives in Raleigh, where I live. So he was like, why don't you just go ahead and stop by my office? And I'm like, really? And so that's how this whole thing got rolling with Arete with me. And so it's been really amazing. It really has. And until you've experienced it, you're never going to understand it.
Right. Right. And I think, one thing that's interesting, and I'll use this as a good segue for us to talk about, a little bit about my entrepreneur journey is, I grew up in a divorced household. There was drugs and alcohol in the family, history of it. A little bit, first time it was called disruptive. I was 8. It's obviously never changed. But at the time, it was not a positive thing, right? So I go through this sordid troublemaker growing up, turned 18, joined the Marines, signed up on my own, would then spend a bunch of years in the Marines in the 90s into the 2000s, so pre and post 9/11. Lots of time in the Middle East, lots of time on aircraft carriers, doing all the cool things that are in the military videos, some cool, some not so cool, right? And there's an interesting thing about being a veteran where the way that I summarize it is, if you were training to be an Olympic athlete, right? You're training your whole entire life just for 1 week or 2 weeks or whatever it is, right?
Right.
And you need to be in the peak mental state, peak performance state. But you've only got to do it for 1 week or 2 weeks or whatever it is. After that, you can eat all the donuts and do whatever you want. But you mentally have it in your head, I only got to be my best for this 1, 2, 3 events, whatever it is. Right. Now, military guys, you join the military, you join the world's #1 largest, best military in the world. And for the entire duration that you serve, you are told you are the best of the best of the best. You're 1% of the planet. There's no one better for you. And you have to operate in the peak mental and peak physical performance for that entire span of time. And you are constantly being pressured to exceed that, right? So with an Olympian, there's a benchmark. I only got to beat a 3-minute mile, or I only got to beat this. There's a benchmark of achievement. Once you get there, it's mapped out. Military veterans are told, you're the best. You're going to be best. You got to get better. You got to be ready to go. You got to be better. You got to be ready to go. And this is your commitment. And then when the government is done with that, well, you're done with your service, no one tells you that anymore. And I really think that that's the root of PTSD, is not so much that, it's not so much that it's obviously if you encounter lots of stress and everything else, but it's like, guess what? I was told for years that there was nobody fucking better than me on the fucking planet. And then they go, all right. And it's not the government's fault. It's when you take the oath, the government promises you the opportunity to serve your country. That is the only thing in the contract that the government promises you. And you commit to a life of service to fulfill that contract, right? So served in the military, came out, needed time to figure out what that actually means. Had some really amazing people take me underneath their wings. I worked at big corporate companies in entry-level capacities. Became interested in data and technology and became pretty technical, started doing my own coding and engineering stuff at night. I'd work my corporate jobs. Come to 2009, I was working at a big investment bank, making lots of money, had all the cool suits, all the things. My ego was through the fucking roof. I came back from the Philippines from a business trip, handed in my expense report, and my boss handed me my pink slip at the same conversation. And at that point, I had made it to that point by lying, cheating, stealing, and pushing my way into all those positions, right? Because the Marines especially, but military guys, you want us to move forward, we're going to move forward.
So let's pause there for just a second. Okay, so you came back from the Philippines, and you said that you were, you kind of lied, cheated your way into all those positions, that being one of them. Is that what you meant by that?
Yep.
So why do you when you say that, what do you mean?
Right. So I think there's this in the corp there is a hard transition for military guys when we take a military resume, for example, and try to transition it into corporate speak, right?
Okay.
And so now military guys military guys and gals come out of the military with strategic values, discipline, the ability to plan, resilience, fortitude, all these things that at the time were non-transferable words into resumes, right? So, the way that I had built up my career to that point was like, I'd work, 10 hours a day, 11 hours a day, 12 hours a day in the office, right? I'd be in a meeting and not understand some of the terminology they'd be using. I'd spend, 4 hours at night, Yahoo, Googling, and then come into the meeting next day and be like, sure, I can tell you all about ISDA negotiations.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Because I made a lot of notes and I did my homework, right?
Yeah.
And then the reality is that in corporate world, I mean like big corporate world, right? I mean, like I was working with big investment banks, hedge funds, real estate organizations, biggest in the world. If you look at my LinkedIn and see the companies that I've worked with, I mean, like I really got super lucky in the world of the veteran world that I was able, but the way I was able to do it was to just work a lot harder than anyone else would, not because the job required it, but because it was me catching up, right? So then in 2009, because I didn't have the certifications, didn't have the college degree at the time, didn't have all of the traditional badges of success, the economy was so bad, nobody would hire me. Nobody would hire me. And, I showed up with a little bit of ego, said, look at all the things I've done in such a short span of time. And they'd be like, well, do you have this? Do you have a project management certification? No. Do you have a Scrum certification? No. Do you have this? I was doing all these very technical, smart things, but it was all just stuff I learned in my basement, right?
So do you let me just pause you for a second. So lots of times I feel like,
sure.
with entrepreneurs, we don't have to go by the same guidelines, right? So all those certifications, because you were in corporate America, it was something that at the time they required because it was just part of the curriculum, so to speak, right? It was just part of the job description.
Correct.
And yeah, they had to check
Correct.
off the boxes. And since you didn't check off the boxes, you didn't qualify. Do you think those times have changed at all now? Does that make sense? In other words,
I think.
Go ahead.
I think that they have altered and become different. But if you want to work in the big traditional corporate companies, right, they have certain boxes they need to check in order to facilitate, and it's a cultural thing. It's 100% a cultural thing. Now, I think that the world has shifted so much in that, like, and in that you don't need those corporate jobs anymore. And they also, post 2010, really don't have the value that they used to have to your resume or to yourself.
Sure.
So for 2009 to 2010, I would end up being unemployed for a full year. Would go into bankruptcy. What I would do is that I would get up in the morning. I had my iPod click wheel at the time. I would go out of my house, run until the music ran out, and then I would run home because I was going nuts. The fact that no one would hire me, I was like, what I was like, what am I doing wrong here? What am I doing wrong here? And I got to a point where I could do 16 miles a day. I was doing it 5 or 6 days a week. Then I would job search every single day, and I was just driving myself nuts. To this day, right, and that's 8-9 years ago, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was one of my first resets to be like, to make it that this wasn't about me, this was about the ecosystem, right? And so finally a company takes me on, little small company, built it, still on the technical side, built it to a certain point, then shifted onto the business development side, then built the company to a certain point, then did an exit from that company, which was an amazing opportunity. And that gave me a window to where I sat back and was able to reset myself. And I thought, what was the thing that actually got me here, right to this point? Like, what was the thing that really, if you want to use the word 10x, like a Grant Cardone says, what was the thing that got me to explode? And when I did a retrospective over that, what I realized is that when I was unemployed, I was meeting so many people, right? I met hundreds of people, right? Some of them were job interviews. Some of them were just, hey, let's get coffee. And what I realize now that I didn't realize at the time is that this was the infancy of building my community and building my network. And so at that point I said, well, let's not stop doing that. Like, we know what that is. Don't stop doing that. And so from that point on, for the next couple of years, even when I was running other businesses, and to this day, meet for people for coffee like 10 or 15 times a week. Like, I will stay up and I will do phone calls with New Zealand and meet entrepreneurs in New Zealand. It's like, the more people that you can touch, right? And this is how, like, the more people you can curate, It's like if you're starting a t-shirt line, if you're selling coffee cups, if you're selling any product, the hard part is is none of the pieces, right? The customer experience is not hard any longer. The platform is not hard any longer. The cost of acquisition of a customer is super expensive. But guess what? If you spend a year or two just meeting people, like I challenge anybody to do this. You spend a whole year or two just meeting people. Meet the kids coming out of college. Meet the older people who are in retirement. Meet moms. Meet dads. Get involved in your BNY, the BNI. Get involved in your church, and then launch a coffee company, and then launch a T-shirt line or whatever it is. You're going to have revenue coming in a lot sooner. And I realized
because you've got fans. You've got, as Tony says, you've got raving fans at that point that love Neal, and they'll buy whatever the hell Neal's selling or doing because they want to support you.
Yep. Yeah, and social media, right, just changes that, right? So it's like let's just say you open up a restaurant, right? A good example. And I think Gary Vee was talking about this last week. You open up a restaurant in a local community, and when everybody comes in at first, you give them free coupons, you give them whatever. Well, the reality is that it takes 3 or 4 times for you to adopt a customer, right? Like truly adopt them is like they love you, they're going to come back, right? So you build this community, and then you layer the social media aspects of it on top of it. And then, I think this is a thing that big influencers give up on because they just don't have the time to do it. And I love doing this. It's like Neal meets Corey, right? We spend time getting to know each other on social media. We do a podcast. Neal then posts the podcast on his social media channels. He says, "Hey, check out Corey and the podcast we did. Do me a favor, share this with people that you think this would resonate with. And if you think you should be on Corey's podcast, hit him up." Right? That costs like 30 seconds and 30 cents.
Right. That's a clever idea, actually.
And people still want to spend $4 a click on Facebook advertising campaigns.
You think it's laziness?
It's laziness. I think it's a little bit of laziness. It's a little bit of the unknown. And, everybody on social media is either, I label them as, they're either producers of content or consumers of content. And I'd say 90% of the people that are on the internet, are consuming your content, and they're not even, their mindset is not, let me engage and be part of the conversation, right? They're people in the crowd, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Not everybody wants to be a contributor.
Right. Yeah, that's for sure. That is for sure. So one thing I was going to say, well, the thought escaped me. You said something that really triggered a thought, but it'll come back to me. So, all right. So tell me, what exactly is cyber security? What, actually, you know what? We can go there in a moment. I actually really like where this conversation is going. I really wish I could remember what the hell it was I was going to say.
It'll come back to you.
Oh, I know what it is. Okay. So if you remember as a child, we were never told, you were always told as a child, don't talk to strangers, correct?
Right.
There was never a time that your parents said to you, it's okay to talk to strangers. So I feel like subconsciously that we've all been programmed as a small child not to talk to strangers. And I think that's why people have a hard time meeting other people, is because I believe subconsciously there's a program that's saying, don't talk to strangers.
Right. I think absolutely that's true. And I think that if you went back, there's tons of stuff on the internet about what I'm about to say. So it's like if you went back 6 years ago and said, hey, we're building this mobile application where I put my daughter into a car with a complete stranger and he drops her off somewhere, people would say you're crazy.
Yeah.
And Uber has a net worth of like $60 billion or something today.
They crushed it.
But think about how the social culture has changed to where we put, and this is probably a good segue into cybersecurity, We put ultimate trust in the ability for this device that we're talking on
Yes.
to complete a sequence of events that makes us feel comfortable enough to put our children, and people do it, or ourselves, in cars with people we don't know.
Which is bizarre now that you say it that way.
Right?
Yes.
And the fundamental is so to segue this into cybersecurity, you know, the way that I explain cybersecurity and some of the things we need to think about is every single person listening to this podcast with a YouTube video and the right tools can fix any piece of their car today. Right?
Sure.
You need to change a spark plug, you need to change brakes, change oil, even change computer chips. There's a video for it online. The right tools, you watch it enough, you could do it. Right? The reason for that is because we know exactly what is underneath the hood of the car. Right?
Right.
Now, this device that we're using today, there is not one, I'd say there is a very, very small percentage of the world that even understands or has taken the time to understand what is underneath the hood of the device that we put our credit card, our children's names, our blood types, our social security numbers, any of that stuff into on a daily recurring basis.
Very
right?
good point. Very good point.
So when, somebody finds out that I've been playing Candy Crush for 12 hours a week for the past 6 months, and Candy Crush is selling my data, and they're mind boggled by it, right? That's a user problem, right? Right? To expect that anything that I can do 12 hours a week, even if I'm sitting on my ass, has no repercussions and is completely free, and they're not making money off of it in some way, and there's not a risk to you there, is you just not paying attention.
Right. So let's break it down to somebody who would not know that. Let's just take that exact scenario. People play games on phones all the time. What is the harm in playing a free game? Just out of curiosity,
Sure. Well, let me back up for a second and bring it right back to that, right?
Okay.
So if you think about it, cybersecurity really, if you go back 7, 8 years ago, maybe even like 6 years ago, I think every person listening to this podcast, at some point you get an email that says, hey, there's illicit charges on your credit card, or something like that, right? And it takes like 6 or 8 weeks to fix it. You go, oh man, it becomes a nuisance, right? Now, as technology has fast forwarded and all these cool, amazing things have made our lives so seamless, right? In the past 20 years, technology has become so exponential, but we fundamentally don't understand the implications of what we're building upon, right? Because we're using new things all the time. And so we're building so quickly that we've built, let's just say, holes, in the infrastructure. And people in different countries and people in different scenarios and states of life and different intentions, have come to exploit those things. So now we don't live in this world where cybersecurity is a nuisance. We live in a world where we have driverless cars coming out. We live in a world where we have Android tablets inside airplanes. We live in a world where we have Nests in our house that can control the heat. We live in a world where Alexa is listening to this podcast right now. All of these things that are amazing, amazing pieces of technology. But there are ways to now compromise those devices because of whatever reason we can do so. And therefore, it's great that we're putting Nest in our house, but it's not great when a hacker is able to log in and make ghost sounds at night and scare the shit out of your kids. Which, if you look on, which is a thing, it's completely a thing.
Wow! Holy hell!
Right, and so what happened was about 4 years ago, I was at an event on cybersecurity, and I was listening to a speaker speak about it, and I was really impressed with the with the person. But what I realized very quickly is that some of the stuff that this person about and have the technical understanding. And so what this has done is that how I've become this, I guess, cybersecurity, I don't even like the word, influencer around the world is if you take my military service, right, the understanding of military strategy, military theater, tactics, operational planning, stuff like that. You apply the understanding I have around technical infrastructure, architecture, and stuff like that. And then you take this ability to articulate it back in kind of a layman's term, everyday Joe kind of way. It really moved me to a place of contribution where, that's what I do now is I build cybersecurity companies because I understand the infrastructure, I understand the ecosystem, I understand people, I understand humans, right? So, to tie it back to your free to Candy Crush, right? And sorry for the folks at Candy Crush, I'm just gonna call you guys out a little bit. All of these games and different things that we load, I mean, it's starting to change, but we don't know what we don't know, right, as a user. And so, you don't realize that when you're playing Candy Crush and we all get these mobile apps and we flip through 30 pages of terms and conditions and we just go, yes, agree, I want to play, I want to play, I want to play, I want to play, because you're getting all the dopamine in your head from it.
Right.
That they're selling your data, to places that you probably don't know. And if those places then get compromised, by someone else, they can then take advantage of your data and then exploit back to credit cards, banking, all these different ways. And it's a complex challenge because we really don't know, the average user doesn't know where their information lives, right? And online, outside of Googling yourself, but you just don't know what else is there. So there's a whole other podcast we can get into on dark web and stuff like that, but we'll just save that one for another day.
Oh God, that's so interesting that you bring that up, because I was just thinking the other day, like how, there was another podcast about Bitcoin, and they were talking about, people think that people use Bitcoin for crime. That's exactly what I thought. Like, I know that people trade it. I know it's a thing. I don't really understand it. I'll be the first to tell you. But the dark web, what can you just briefly touch on? Like, what the hell is it? Who uses it? How do they not, or how do they get caught? How do they not get caught? Like, I don't understand what it is, other than a place where you can buy some fucked up shit.
Well, so appreciate the question for sure. So think about it like this, right? Okay. If you think about the way that we used to live, right? I'll even joke around here a little bit, right? I'm doing this on purpose, right? So it's like, we would have a desk and we'd take all these papers, right? And we'd pile them up, right? And then on a desk in the office, you'd have all these piles of paper. And someone goes, hey, do you got that report or that presentation? And you go fumbling through, and at the bottom of the page, there'll be that report from like 3 weeks ago.
Sure.
Right? All we've done with the internet is compile millions and millions and billions of pieces of paper on top of each other. That's all. Like, if you think about every website, it's just a piece of paper.
Right.
Right? It's just built. And so it just keeps going, right? We're piling it up digitally, right? We never get rid of it. It just lives in a cloud somewhere.
Right.
But it still sits there, right? And so if you think about how that's happened now, if you go into your basement and you go into a box and there's your taxes from 15 years ago and you dust them off, right? So what happened over time is there was a basement built on the internet filled with papers, with just all the junk from the late 80s, early 90s, old code, stuff like that. Okay. And then people started to go down into the basement and be like, why don't we store some shit here that we don't want anyone to see?
Mm.
And then little by little, people who wanted to hide things that no one else wanted to see, it's like, so think about your house, right, as the, current digital landscape. My Facebook, my Instagram, my, that's your house, right? Now, in the basement, there's some people doing some shady stuff.
Right.
And so, if I, and so the only way visitors in your house know where that exists is if you show them the door to the basement,
Sure.
right? Which is what's called a tour. So, people started to then go, well, if I steal credit card information from a bank and I use it, the likelihood of me getting caught is very likely. So I'm not going to do that. But if I go in the basement, I bet I could find a guy or girl who's going to buy the credit card information from me.
Mm.
And then so I'm going to go down to the basement, I'm going to sell credit card information. And then it became, about other stuff,
Yes.
right? And so now, I mean, there's actually a platform called Secure Mantis, which I'll send over to you so you can share it with folks. And what it's meant to be a digital product for entrepreneurs, where you put your email, a little bit of other information into it, and then this platform searches the basement and pulls anything that might exist on the dark web about you, and goes, hey, this is the stuff that's there, and then helps you remediate it to make sure it's not there, and then does dark web monitoring to make sure that none of your information ever shows up in the basement ever again.
Is it illegal to go into the dark web, so to
Uh,
speak?
it is not illegal.
Okay.
It is, the challenges is that it's a very, at this point, our internet over the globe has gotten so large that that the basement has gotten big as the house stays the same size. The basement gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and there is more shelves and more tunnels and more ways, and it's very complex, or it gets more and more complex.
Gotcha.
But I mean, the good news is that at this point, because of some of the background and folks I work with, you also have many governments operate on it. We fundamentally understand how it works.
Really?
It's not this hidden thing anymore. You've got good guys, for lack of better words, good guys and bad guys that are constantly keeping track of the files and records that exist there.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah, I just never really had anybody break it down to me exactly. I've heard stories of what it is and what you can do on it, and I'm like, well, I wouldn't even want to log into that fucking thing to find out all that shit. I wouldn't even want to even think about doing that because I wouldn't want to be associated with anyway. So, all right. So how did you get into this other than, I guess, through the Marines, that you did some of this while you were a Marine?
No, you know what? The funny thing is, no. When I was a Marine, I didn't do anything cyber like. I mean, I saw. I really just had an affinity towards it about 4 years ago, and I'm an infinite researcher. Well, number one, I'm an infinite researcher. Number two, and this is just me feeding my ego a little bit, I hate to be fucking wrong about something.
Ooh, I get that.
Hate it, right?
Yes.
And so when I came out of the military, I was, for the type of jobs I was getting, I was probably about 4 or 5 years older than people in my roles at the time, right? And so I always felt I was trying to catch up. So at night, so people would say things in meetings, and I'd write them down, and I'd go home at night and Google it and read up on it. And the next day I'd feed it into my conversation, and I'd be like, well, if you're going to talk about BPO, we should talk about BCP. And like, I needed to be right, right?
Sure.
Because of my own insecurities in the roles, right? That's why I say, I lied, cheated, and stole my way into those roles, because I was able to become an expert in some things because I just read the internet a lot at night. But with cybersecurity, it becomes, you need to understand the fundamentals of how these things actually work. And I understand the fundamentals, extremely well. And so I tie it from my military years of operations and tactical planning to, I've built my own mobile apps from scratch. And so I know the way the code operates and works. And then just getting into the weeds, because the crazy thing about cybersecurity is, if you look at accounting, real estate, plumbing, electrician, influencer, all these businesses, they're all established, right? There's like 1, 2, 3, 4 ways of running this business. And there's a benchmark. And in cybersecurity, you actually have countermeasures, right? So every time a new cybersecurity product comes out, there's somebody trying to figure out a new way to do it. So imagine you're a real estate broker and somebody comes to you and goes, no, we don't do real estate broker selling that way anymore. We do it this way. And 6 months later, someone else comes to you and goes, no, we don't sell real estate that way anymore. We do it this way. And that's been going on for like 2 years. So it's like this moving beast that's going around the world globally, constantly. And what that creates is there's so much opportunity to get into it. The employment rate, the unemployment rate in cybersecurity right now, the last number I saw was somewhere between -8 and -10%.
You're kidding. Wow.
So that means that 100% of the cyber workforce is employed. Most of them have a secondary role somewhere or some kind of part-timey thing you're doing. And they're still missing 10% of the workforce.
Dang. So where would you go? I mean, do you go to, I guess you go to college to learn about cybersecurity? Where would you suggest if somebody listening was, hey, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. This sounds cool. Where would they go? How would they go about getting into it?
I mean, there's definitely college courses. I mean, most of the interesting thing, tying back to your comment about the corporate checking the boxes back in 2009, right? I would say the thing about cybersecurity, the most valuable skill that you can have is your ability to be able to think out of the box, right? Mm-hmm. Because the real thing about cybersecurity is you're trying to constantly outsmart someone.
That makes sense.
And so some of the most amazing cyber folks I've met have been, just scrappy, right? And so you could absolutely go to college for it. You can most of the big schools have it, but I would say that there's go find a scrappy cyber guy or gal and go have coffee with them and talk to them for like 2 days. Yeah. And start there, right? Then I think there's tons of great online courses that you can do that will give you fundamentals very, very easily. And then the other piece of it is cybersecurity is a specific thing, but it's broadening out. And what's interesting is like, it touches project management, it touches compliance, it touches legal in your company, it touches all these responsibility functions. So if you have skill sets in those areas, you can very easily step into a role and say, hey, I'd also like to start to manage or learn or interact more with the security team. And you can naturally go that route. There's also a bunch of certifications that you can do that you pay money and within a couple of weeks you get certified, or a couple of months you get certified. But people, typically want they want some hands-on experience. They want somebody to be like, I'm scrappy and I did this, and so getting in at an entry level is probably is a good way to do it as well. Like, just be like, hey, I want to get into entry level.
Sure. And like you said, finding somebody that you see, how well they're doing, or finding that scrappy guy and modeling after what they do, and somehow convincing them to kind of take you under their wing is probably the best way to learn, the best way to get into it. Does that make sense?
I think so. And the hard part is, it's very hard for people to conceptualize this thing of like, this beast of cybersecurity as an industry right, is moving forward right now. It's never standing still. Like right now, they're like, not to get too cryptic again. It always sounds so cryptic when I talk about this. From Tuesday, from one Tuesday to another Tuesday, there is 6 million new types of malware and viruses developed every day.
Damn. That's
Right?
insane.
So by the following week, as an ecosystem, we need to have solutions for as many of those as possible, because the next week there's another 6 million coming out. Now what happens is a lot of them end up becoming redundant. A lot of them are easy to solve. A lot of them we figured out, but it is churning just constantly. And so like one of the places where I seem to add a lot of value to the network of cybersecurity leaders that I interact with is I'm both in the house and outside in the world constantly. So, it's like if you on 57 Chevys, that 57 Chevy inside and outside, right?
Right.
Mechanic, a car shows up and the guy's got a Tesla and he's like, I want you to fix my shit, bro. That guy's gonna be like, I can't help you.
Right. So do you think the biggest difference between you and someone else in your industry is that, my guess would be, if you're in cybersecurity, that you would probably not, most folks would not be as outgoing as you. They would not be as, interacting with other human beings as much. That would be my perception. Is that correct?
I would say it's funny, there's a large percentage of the cybersecurity community that is extremely, for lack of better description, introverted,
Right.
in thought process. And there's a shit ton of unapologetic cyber beards out there as well.
Ah, gotcha. That makes sense. That actually makes sense. Okay. So tell me really quickly, and I'm cognizant of your time. I want you to talk about the Press Forward project and what your goal is with that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that one up. So my next mission, right? So I'm extremely grateful for the wins I've had, the losses I've had, right? My weaknesses have become my strengths, if I'm going to be honest. And I still engage and see, tons of veterans, that just are not operating at their, as Ed Milet says, at their best version of themselves, right? They've settled,
Yeah.
right? And so I real quick, I ran across a veteran a couple of years ago, and he was begging for money, in New York City. And he said, come on, man, help me out. I'm a veteran. And I was having a bad day, if I'm going to be honest. I turned around and I said, you know what, man, what the fuck does that got to do? I'm sorry for the F-bomb. What does that got to do with anything? I'm a veteran. And I felt really bad. I ended up giving the guy money anyway. But that kind of planted a seed for me to be like, really the next mission for Neal, my next level of contribution back to this community that I've built and am part of is, building a couple of businesses, doing amazing things, pivoting into becoming a transformational coach with the model that, if I can do this, you can too. Right. And I mean, if you look at I don't have the background of someone from a traditional standpoint that should have gotten to the point of success that I've gotten to. But I didn't let that story limit me from getting to where I got to and moving forward. And so my focus now is to spend time being an example of discipline, an example of contribution, and to what the Press Forward project is we've built a podcast that we've run. We've built a white labeled coffee bean company out of it. We've built swag out of it, t-shirts and hats and stuff like that. We've even got art that's been produced that's on the Press Forward Project website. And it's just showing the simpleness that in today's day and age with all this digital stuff at our fingerprints, if you've got an idea, a little bit of effort, and you're $200 or $300, start your LLC and get going, that you can do better than, sitting around doing nothing, especially if you're a veteran and you have all these amazing skills that are just buried and need to be dusted off, right?
Sure.
And you and I talked about this before we recorded, and it's like, if you don't have the $200 or $300, right, as somebody who has just finished my 5-day fast of no food at all, it's like, you don't eat for a week, there you're gonna have your $200 or $300.
Without a doubt. So I think from what I'm hearing and connecting it back to something you had said earlier, the mindset of if we could figure out a way to keep the mindset when they're coming out with you're number one, you're the 1%, you're the baddest motherfucker on the planet. If you could figure out a way to keep that mindset and let him move into the world with the same mindset, opposed to moving into the world and being like, shit, I've got no support now. I think that would be huge, right? Because if you just bridge that one little gap, it would make all the difference in the world.
Right. And I think it goes back to what you said. You said a very compelling thing, and I appreciate it, where it's like, when you or I grew up, our parents were telling us, don't talk to strangers, right?
Yes.
And, there's other stuff there that we're programmed on where, the way the school system, was built for years, right, is around, failure is a bad thing. Failure is unacceptable. And all those type of things. And there are times when failure is unacceptable. There's times in our lives where that is very, very true. However, it creates these moments where, if you tie that back into the emotions of how we're programmed, where if we're, programmed from our parents that we're not enough and that we're not loved in a certain way, and you tell me that failure is bad, well, you've created this triangle where, I'm 40 years old now, and I'm just making this up. I'm 40 years old now. I'm in a job. I'm married. I've got 2 kids. I've got this. I've got that. There's nothing else for me. I'm not going to even reach out of my comfort zone and do something amazing.
Right.
And you and I both know this. Like, once you step out of that comfort zone, and once you know that you can get a taste for what it's like to grow, and it hurts to grow, right? That's why it hurts to grow. It'll always hurt.
Yeah. True.
But that programming piece that we need to unlock, and make it to be like, hey, you know what? The piece we didn't talk about, we could talk about another time, is like, I started a business. We got $1 million in sales in 30 days. Cash.
Wow.
And 6 months later, I put the business into the ground.
Shit.
And at the time, I didn't have the systems. I didn't have the processes, and I let my ego get in the way. And 1000%, the reason why you and I are on this podcast and talking about all the cool shit that's going on now is because I nosedived that business into the ground.
It's interesting because ironically, to further that point, I drove my hormone replacement clinic into the ground and lost everything October of last year. And so, to your point, you're exactly fucking right. On both ends, you're exactly right.
Yep.
Without a shadow of a doubt. All right, my man. Well, listen, Neal, thank you so much. You're definitely going to have to come back on because there's a whole bunch of other shit that I want you to talk about. Because I think we just scratched the surface. I don't even think we really got as far into this as I would have liked. But listen, dude, thank you so much. I really, 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 really appreciate it. You going to Date with Destiny?
I am. I'm going back to see Tony in about 10 days. So going to Date with Destiny, and going to burn some more boats when I do a massive shift when I come out of there as well.
Yes, I can't wait. I can't wait to hear about it, dude. So thank you so much again, Neal, and I'll let you know when this bad boy drops, and you have an awesome day, brother. It was
Thanks,
my
man. Really
pleasure.
appreciate it. My pleasure for being on. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.